the organization too. And so onboarding is a huge part of that. Misty said that I have over 15 years of experience in HR. It's actually probably a little bit more, but I did have a break in between. But when I started in HR, you merely, attended a day-long orientation. So I've just, when I came back into the HR world again, about 10 years ago, I just love this whole idea of onboarding and how creative we can get to it, in terms of setting up those best practices, and was lucky enough to do that with a couple of clients too. And the great thing about consulting is when we're on site with clients, we learn from them too. So a lot of these are ideas that are best practices out there. Some of them are from clients I've actually worked with, as well as some of our own. So let's hope that you enjoy what you learned today. So the learning objectives today are really to review the stats and perspectives on virtual onboarding, learning 4 essential components of an effective onboarding program, and discussing the short-term effects of a positive onboarding program. The key example we think of today, of course, is less ghosting on the first day, and really helping that new employee really adjust to the role. And we know that this is much more difficult in this virtual and remote type work environment to really get them to feel comfortable in their new role. And then we're going to share some new tools, innovative and low and no cost practices, and kind of give some coaching to support virtual onboarding success. So onboarding helps new hires really adjust to the social and performance aspects of their jobs so they can quickly become productive, contributing members of the organization. And again, as opposed to orientation, which is maybe just, that first day, we're thinking of the benefits paperwork and all the, tax forms and everything. And then generally you're sort of relegated off to read a bunch of SOPs and kind of try to figure out what to do next. So why does it matter? Well, first of all, it's a first impression. So if your onboarding process is chaotic, if it's outdated, the new hires are really going to assume that the company isn't well managed, because they are seeing really terrific onboarding programs at other organizations. So many times people, it's not going to be their first gig necessarily. They are going to be comparing you to their other experiences, as well as the experiences of their family and friends. The other thing is employee engagement. If they're not engaged, they're not really going to be as productive as those engaged employees. So this really helps them get engaged early. Also, there's a financial responsibility that you have to your organization, and successful onboarding directly affects your company's bottom line. If we do get people who are ghosting us on the first day, or maybe they quit after a few days, there's a significant investment that you've already made in getting those people to that point. Going through the hiring process costs a lot of money. It's hours. It's a lot of time that could be, allocated in better ways. So we definitely don't want to kind of lose that momentum that we've already gained and the work that we've already put in to hiring those employees. So here's just a few things that new employees have said. Onboarding was great, but then I went to my work area and realized none of it mattered now. So that kind of speaks to this idea: is onboarding one day, or is it something that we continue on a little bit? And we'll talk about that later. My manager was so busy, I didn't even see him until my second week on the job. Not good. Handed 4 product manuals and told to start reading. After 2 days, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. And this is a very common problem, kind of not having that work to give them right away to help them get engaged early on. And lastly, I had to figure everything out on my own. No one showed me how to access voicemail, email, or where the restrooms were. Now, obviously, those are for on-site onboarding programs, but we have similar issues and more challenging situations when we are onboarding virtually. So companies that can reduce the onboarding time will find themselves at a competitive advantage because employees will reach productivity sooner, have higher morale, and more likely to stay on the job. Now, when I say reduce the onboarding time, that doesn't mean keep onboarding to one day. That means really getting employees to the point that they feel on board. I'm on board with this company. I'm on board with our mission. I'm on board with what my duties are and how my job really relates to the mission of the organization. So it doesn't necessarily mean that onboarding programs should be limited to a week or a day or even 3 months. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. The 4 C's of onboarding: compliance, clarification, culture, and connection. So we're going to talk about some strategies, but anytime you set up an onboarding program, and you should have a well thought out program, make sure that it is addressing these 4 areas. What is necessary for compliance and getting this job, signing the paperwork, all of that, knowing the rules, the safety, whatever it is that impacts your organization. Make sure that they feel clear on expectations, processes, who to talk to, and whatever else an employee may need to know, basically. And let's get that culture. Let's get them embedded in that culture, get them to understand the culture and truly feel connected. I'm sure you've all heard that people tend to leave organizations less often if they have a best friend there, or certainly if they have many people who they're going to miss. It's much harder to quit that organization, quit that job. So we want to form those connections as early as possible. So we're going to get into some of the best practices for virtual onboarding. I'm excited about these. There's some fun ideas in here. And again, low cost, no cost. So as I said earlier, you want a clear virtual onboarding plan, and really you want a clear onboarding plan, but just make sure that your virtual employees are also kind of having the same or similar experience, and that they're all being kind of wowed by this onboarding plan. So make sure that you document what the process is. Make sure that you consistently carry that process out with every employee. Include milestones, specific timelines, things that they should have accomplished as a part of their onboarding program. And then make sure the plan highlights things to accomplish even before the new hire begins working. So onboarding can actually take place. I mean, it's actually starting the moment they look at your organization and start to get a feel for what your culture is and whatnot. But certainly, their interview experience, their candidate experience. And then as soon as you've made that offer, we're really talking about the employee experience. So there can be things, and there should be, by the way, activities before they actually start. So some organizations, depending on the type of employees they're recruiting for, if it's a high turnover, high volume, think call center maybe, or just you find that a lot of people are not showing up or people are quitting early. You want to make sure that there's communication. It might be daily communication. It might be a text saying, hey, we're excited to see you on Friday. Here's some directions. Or here's the Zoom link where you'll begin your virtual onboarding. Maybe you're sending them something to get started, to get set up. It could be something that's maybe a note from their manager or a colleague. So don't miss that week or 2 before they start. Very, very critical. But then we're going to look at ongoing tasks that they need to complete. Once they've got their workload, we don't just leave them. That's not when onboarding ends. So make sure that there are some other check-ins along the way. So as I said, that critical first part after the offer, you're going to be sending out a welcome packet. Probably most people do that. Different things in it that they should review. Make sure that there's an agenda in there so they understand what that onboarding is going to look like. Build their excitement a little bit about that. Company swag, be thoughtful about what that might look like. If they have a home office, it might be something that kind of relates to their office, but maybe it's a t-shirt, water bottle, whatever fits with your brand. There are HR documents. We're still going to have to sign things. We're not going to get away from that, but make sure that they are clear on what needs to be completed and when the deadlines are for those. As I said, something fun maybe for the remote office. There are some companies who send out even money that can be used to, outfit their home office. Give them, certainly if there's someone who will be on a computer, let them know when they can expect their computer and how they're going to get that all set up. That can be a very, just kind of a anxious time for an employee, knowing when they're going to get that. If they're not super tech savvy, are they going to be comfortable setting that up on their own? So give a lot of thought to that. Give a lot of thought about the person's own comfort level doing that setup. So we really want to establish personal connections. I mentioned earlier, we want some sticking points. The more sticky points someone has, and when I say sticky points, I mean people who they've met along the way. So think about that HR person who maybe did the first interview. Was that the last time this person spoke to them? Or did they, kind of introduce them along the way during their interview process to the other people? Did they check in back with them again? Are they signing the offer letter or having continuing conversations about that transition? That's one person. Then, of course, we've got potential colleagues, other stakeholders, certainly their own manager. So the more we get those sticking points, the more likely they are to show up and feel engaged. Host video conferences and assign them welcome buddies, culture ambassadors, peer coaches. Depends on what their job is, of course, but we want them to have another person who actually isn't their manager, who they can feel comfortable asking a question and not feeling like it's kind of a dumb question, maybe. So it could be someone in an adjacent department even. Some companies have culture ambassadors, and that might be the person that kind of welcomes them on their first day. So think on site, they're greeting them at the door. Virtually, maybe they're signing in 15 minutes early to the Zoom call. Maybe they have a separate call on another day as well. Peer coaches are more about the work. So again, if we think of that call center, just understanding the technology, who do I go to ask, how to log into this or how to complete this report? That might be more of my peer coach. And consider using cohorts. Cohorts are great ways to build those bonds. Everybody's coming in kind of on the same foot, and they might actually even be at different levels. And that can be a great way to understand more about the organization and have these people who kind of are on that same learning curve as your new employee. So of course, they're going to be working on a team, and we want to make them feel at home. So figure out some innovative ways to really get them to know their team. If your virtual employee is actually within driving distance to a home office or a regional office, consider maybe having an in-house meeting at some point. It might be the first day, or it might be taking them to lunch a week later, but try to get some people together in person if logistically and geographically that can happen. Of course, you could have people who are in different states, and consider, is there a quarterly meeting where we want to bring everyone together, or something timely where people can meet in person, because we know that that is indeed the best way to really bond. But encourage them to schedule video calls with as many employees as possible and make sure they've got the tools to do that. Consider virtual coffee breaks and lunches to integrate them into the company culture as seamlessly as possible. And these can be items that are actually a part of your process. So when we talked about kind of setting up that plan and that process, maybe they are assigned to meet with 10 different people over the course of, 6 weeks or something. The first week, we tend to not have quite as much work to do. So some of those meetings with teammates, with other stakeholders within the organization can be a nice way to fill the time too. And again, it's not as boring as kind of being told to just wait for email or read some SOPs. So there will be training, of course, when you are onboarding virtually. So let's make sure that that training is easy to do. It should go beyond the regular training. You may have some existing employees who can share useful tips. I mentioned that peer coach. Maybe there's some meetings to go over a certain part of their job. Someone should introduce them to the LMS. And you might have some webinars that new hires attend together. These webinars don't have to be just for new hires either. Let's say that you're going to have a benefits webinar, on a weekly basis. You might find that there are some employees who've recently changed to the company benefits, or perhaps they're going to have, something coming up in their life and they need to understand a part of the benefits a little bit more, like the EAP program, or they're going to have a baby or something like that. So that's a great opportunity to keep those webinars open for other employees to join. And again, more people to kind of interact and connect with. Live webinars are always the best, I think, if you can manage it, because people get to really answer those questions in real time and again, forge a connection and get a comfort level with the person training. And then as they're training, make sure that you're providing feedback and correcting, showing them the correct methods, the strategies or the techniques that they should be using. So again, I'm going back to that call center employee. Of course, there's going to be training on how to handle, a customer conflict, or what do we do when they ask this question, or who do I refer them to? So it could be some even shadowing virtually with someone who's already in that role. So I mentioned organizing some group gatherings. If we can do it in the office, that's terrific. Sometimes we even find combinations. I know with Purple Ink, we've got some people who can come into the office. We've got some people who are in other states or other locations where they just can't hop in that day. So we want to try to make it as inviting and comfortable for both the people in the office as well as the people at home or at another location. Remember, though, this disconnection and isolation are some of the key challenges that remote new hires experience. Even personally, having hired some recruiters this year, they're just confident, great people. And we had some great conversations, and I think we did everything right. But I was actually even surprised that they were seeking more connection. So I'm not really a micromanager. I kind of let people, do their thing. But knowing that they wanted more connection, we decided what was best for us was to really have a regular check-in, but also understanding communication preferences, and that, anybody can call me anytime, they can text me anytime, and just kind of understanding what works for the people on your team. Develop different measures even for creating a sense of belonging and integration. Maybe that means that you've got certain things on the calendar so that you're not just realizing, wow, 4 weeks went by and we haven't actually all gotten together. So those things really need to be planned. Again, maybe that's a quarterly team meeting, but maybe it's a weekly check-in with your manager. Here's some of the fun stuff that I absolutely love talking about. And if you got me on a call just to talk about this stuff, I'm sure I could come up with more ideas because it's just great fun. But certainly virtual happy hours. You can even send gift cards for DoorDash, where let's say that, you have Indian or Mexican food delivered, and so everybody's sort of on the same page, or they can order their own snack. But it could be a theme. Let's say, again, back to the Mexican food theme. Maybe you're sending out, fun decorations that can even go behind their desk so that you can see it on screen. Or maybe there's a competition to wear something fun. Maybe it centers around your favorite sports team and everybody wears a jersey that day. So you have to, again, look at your team. Not everybody's personality loves doing those things, but you kind of will get to know your team and see what they like to do. But that's a super easy thing to do. We've done some virtual games. There's a company, if anyone is interested in learning about it, we could certainly direct you to it. They actually host some virtual word games, even sort of password type games, Pictionary type games. Those are great fun, and you always learn about each other, because we're not going to do a virtual game about work necessarily. We're going to be talking about some of our hobbies, interests, things of that nature. Strengths coaching. Now, this gets a little more into the professional development area, but if you know Purple Ink, you know that we are a strengths-based culture, and we live it, we breathe it, we try to know each other's strengths and be in tune with our own. But consider whether you use predictive index, strengths, DISC, Enneagram, countless different personality tests and assessments rather. Consider doing that coaching and do it on an ongoing basis. I once was told that if you go to a training, it's kind of like a day at the spa. Like, it feels great. You go back home, you're really invigorated. You're going to really dig into this, and then you kind of forget about it. It's like, okay, the massage wore off. I'm now just back in my regular mode. So keep that strengths coaching going. Consider doing it with your employees, maybe, twice a year. Consider doing it as a team, or even connecting teammates to learn about each other's strengths, especially if there's some opposites. There can be some oil and water on teams. You've got maybe have a real analytical person on your team, and maybe you've got someone who's fly by the seat of their pants. They don't always all get along. So this can be a great activity. Employee resource groups, great ways for people to bond. There might be a parenting group that people get into. There might be certain sports or other resource groups too, but these are great ways to forge connections. Book clubs can be fun, and those can be about work, or they could be more nonfiction kind of fun books too. But again, great ways to get together. So we're building this engaging virtual culture, and we want to make sure that we've got all the essentials provided. So let's think about that office again. Think about this monthly or even quarterly office supplement. So my daughter had been offered a job, and it was going to be virtual, and they offered, or I guess part of their plan was really a $50 Amazon card monthly. And then that way they could kind of gradually set up their office. And then another client of mine said that what they've done is do away with cell phone reimbursements, because, everybody has a cell phone now for the most part. And they've decided to go for a lifestyle supplement. And their reasoning for doing this was they could do whatever they want. They could save up and buy a standing desk if they wanted to, or they could use it, for whatever they, want to have. It doesn't even have to be related to work specifically. They decided to do that quarterly because it's just a bigger number coming in than, $50 monthly. So think about what works for your team. But adding something like that's kind of a big wow thing when they get hired and they learn that they might be eligible for that. Create guidelines, policies, expectations. Now we're getting into a little bit of performance management here, and we all do worry about that. I think we're coming around the corner on that, and people are understanding that work can be done virtually, and it doesn't have to be, butts in seats, so to speak. I don't have to see you to know that you're working. But depending on the job, you'll want to communicate clearly, what are the hours that I'm expected to be at my desk and be responding to email? Is it 9 to 5? Does 9 to 5 mean then that I don't log on after work? Or are you okay with me, doing a yoga class at 10, but logging on at night again, or picking up my kids from school? So have those guidelines and policies and set those expectations. Make sure that you have a culture statement and an employee value proposition that is clearly articulated to the employee. Ideally, this is written and it's even a part of your job posting, because we have to attract people to get them to the point of actually being hired. But make sure that that is articulated clearly. And then make sure that you're living up to it as well. Schedule meetings with key leaders for these new employees. Depending on the size of your organization, it might be possible to have the CEO pop in on orientation or schedule a one-on-one. But having that direct connection to leadership is another way for employees to feel more at ease. So speaking of ease, we want to start them working, but we want them to have some kind of low-hanging fruit to kind of check off and feel a sense of accomplishment and to build some confidence right away. So be thoughtful about what those easy tasks are for them to kind of get started on early on. Make sure, obviously the orientation part does have to happen. So there's going to be some HR paperwork. I kind of encourage you to maybe have that done before they even get there. It might be done virtually and submitted, via email. But otherwise, make the morning of their first job more about the fun, more about engagement, and leave some of the paperwork maybe to the afternoon. Could be a short video about the company culture. Could be a meeting with IT to set up their company, their email, any software that needs to be uploaded. And then let's get to that fun part about it too. So think about a company passport. We have a client that has a lot of their employees. They have a very diverse employee base who come from many, many different cultures, and they actually have the flags of those countries that their employees have come from flying in their building. So for them and their brand, they developed a company passport. And in that passport, there were different things that could be checked off along the way to make sure that they're getting integrated into the company. Again, you're not going to necessarily check all these things off in 1 week or 1 day. This might be for 6 months even, that they have an opportunity to kind of complete things with this passport. And then maybe there's something they receive at the end of that. Think of a bingo game, again, checking off the boxes. Or maybe a scavenger hunt that could be done in the first day or week. And okay, I know we're talking about virtual here, but what could they find on the website to learn a little bit about the history of the company? Think about the scavenger hunt in that way. Things on the website, things they've learned about the company, different communications they could have with different people. So again, some fun things that they can feel kind of a sense of accomplishments that they've done some things and checked off some boxes. So we mentioned training. Of course, that's critical. There will be some virtual training sessions. They can be just for that cohort, just for that person. They could be, again, opened up to the company on the whole. You could have one-on-one live video calls in terms of, again, the software, meeting with IT. Depends on kind of how many people are onboarding and what makes sense. You may have an LMS that they could get through several modules on their own. If you do, that's a great way to, help them integrate early. I would encourage it not to be a lot of boring information, again, right up front. Make sure there are some fun things that they can do as a part of it, some video interspersed into it, and then go through it yourself. We talk about customer or client candidate experience and customer experience and employee experience. And I always say, you've got to go through it yourself. If you've got somebody who is sleeping in your guest room, you need to sleep in that guest room and see what it feels like. See if you can go through that onboarding program, or if it seems like it needs a little more spice or, activity. But they should not be sitting 8 hours, reading for sure. So we're again going to introduce the team. So this is a less intimidating, kind of more fun conversations. Start with those small groups of stakeholders, the employees that they're really going to be interacting with regularly, and make sure managers are having one-on-one meetings or other supervisors who they'll engage with frequently. Check-ins, I mentioned earlier, these are critical. So again, we are talking not about that first day necessarily, not even necessarily about that first week, although of course you should have a check-in the first week with your manager, probably daily check-ins, but make sure that you have scheduled time with the manager and the employee. And that can also be changed as time goes on, but everybody needs more of a check-in early on. So even though you may think that you've got a super confident and competent employee starting, schedule those check-ins. You can always back off of them. Questionnaires or coaching platforms can be a part of the check-ins. We use 15.5 at Purple Ink. I really love that. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, and I'm not selling it because there are other platforms out there, this is just the one I'm familiar with. The concept is that my employees would take 15 minutes to fill it out, mention kind of what things they're working on, what things they accomplished, what they plan to do between the next check-in, things they felt good about, how they were able to use their strengths, things that I can help support them with. You can plug in whatever questions you want. You can also put goals in there, but I know that then I guess the other side of that is it would take me 5 minutes to review it. I can comment, I can like, I can smiley face, all those things that, that we do. And then I complete it as well for my boss. So that is a great way to just even get a temperature gauge. The first question on ours is just, how did you feel about your week? And, it's 1 through 5. And of course, if you do 5 stars, you get a little fireworks and it's exciting, but it tracks your norm. My norm might be 4.2, but someone else's norm might be 3.5. So we don't all have to be a 5, but it is a way to see, wow, they've kind of dipped a little bit this week. What's going on, and start that conversation so that you can be there to support them. Let's see, consider a walking check-in. Now, again, we're not together, but pick up the phone, put in your headphones, model that wellness is important, and it's okay to take a quick walk and talk. When we're working virtually, we don't necessarily have that opportunity to get up and go to the water cooler, run into somebody, in the hallway and talk to them about this, that, or the other thing. So even just for your own physical health, nobody can sit at a desk for 8 hours. So if you don't have to be looking at a spreadsheet together and your agenda is pretty basic in terms of your check-in, say, hey, let's go for a walk. And that just gives your employee kind of that idea that you understand that they need to move around too, and wellness is important. Have a fixed agenda and plan accordingly to kind of attain the desired results from that check-in. Make it periodical. Again, start out maybe with more, and then you can adjust as you go on. Focus on their development, the goals, and performance. And I would really add on to this, their well-being as well, and belonging. Do we ever really ask someone, other than how's it going? Do we say, how do you feel you're really fitting in with the organization? Are you finding some allies within the organization? Those direct questions are going to yield much better results than how's it going? And I'm guilty. I fall into this for sure. So be intentional, write it down, and make sure that you're asking those questions that are going to yield more information. Because these might be it might kind of give you a heads up even that someone is not comfortable in their job, or they might be looking elsewhere. And maybe you can kind of avert that and keep them on board. So groups, cohorts, we mentioned that earlier. Certainly depending on the volume of the people you're hiring, that's a great way to go. If you can't onboard in a group, schedule conference or group sessions and invite maybe all the new employees who joined in the past 3 months to maybe hit certain topics. And then create a fun icebreaker for more of that relationship building within that group. Tools are very important. That is one of the questions that should be really on anyone's onboarding plan is, do you have the tools to do your job? You would be surprised how often we make assumptions that people are fine with things. You know, again, back to cell phones. I'm very comfortable using my cell phone and texting people, but I can't assume that everyone on my team feels comfortable using their personal phone. So that could be an answer that comes up, and maybe we look for, you know, another solution. Maybe it's Google Voice, maybe it's getting them a phone, who knows? But make sure that they have the tools to adequately do their job. Also, sometimes there are tools that a manager might not be aware of that can be helpful. So for example, in recruiting, having a texting capability on your applicant tracking system is something that might really work well for certain companies. But the HR director maybe hasn't done recruiting in a long time and frankly isn't maybe keeping up on the latest technology. So this is an opportunity for them to share how they can be more engaged and more successful in their work. Tools, though, can be frustrating and very demotivating if they don't understand them. Even think about some of the different chat channels and the many different ways that we do communicate. I know on my team, some people like the chat feature on Teams. Some people really don't think to look there. So decide what your main communication channels are, be open to what your team wants, what works for them, but then make sure that you're giving the training for those tools to be used. Dual screens can be helpful, phone systems, laptops, and any tools that are needed for meetings too. I want to talk about combo virtual and in-person meetings. I mentioned that earlier. This is something that we have quite often. And I've noticed that, you know, sometimes it's really a struggle for the participants who are in the virtual setting to really hear what's going on. People I know on our team who are confident communicators would be adding valuable insight into our communications feel a little bit literally muted by being, you know, in their own office and not on site. It's hard to interrupt when you're in a Zoom call. And when you're on site, those conversations and those little mini interactions and you know, are much easier to kind of accomplish. So make sure that they have the right tools so that productivity is not lost. In that scenario, I love the idea of having a Zoom buddy. And so if, you know, my colleague is maybe not in the room, maybe we get on a few minutes early and talk about if there's anything special that that person may want to cover. Any good meeting should have an agenda. So ideally they've got an agenda and we're kind of looking at that together. And then I keep an eye out for my Zoom buddy to maybe raise their hand on Zoom and kind of help get everyone, you know, quieted so that we can hear what they want to say. So that's something that I think could be really a great help. And making sure that those virtual participants can hear and be heard. And I've got invite an owl to the table. So this is one that I got from a dear friend of mine who's an HR director. And they have a device. I'll have to find out the information if anyone's interested in it. But it literally is an owl that sits in the middle of the table. And whoever is speaking at the table, the owl turns to, so that the Zoom participants can see the speaker very easily. So again, if that's something anyone's interested in, reach out. I will try to find out who makes the owl, but I thought that was a cool idea. So what do new hires want? They want interactive onboarding groups. They don't want to necessarily be that person alone. They want an informative introduction meeting and meetings, comprehensive training on the work that they're going to be doing because they want to feel confident about it. So go figure it out on your own. It's not going to work for everyone. I, definitely am more of a kinesic learner. I can read directions. I'm capable of doing it, but it is not my preferential way of learning. So ask the person how they best learn. Doesn't mean that you can change it for everyone, but if they're more of a doer in terms of learning, they will get up to speed much more quickly if they're screen sharing with someone on the team who can show them what to do, or maybe even being brought in for training and then sent out remotely. But ask that question. New hires do want some of this low-hanging fruit to check off. So make sure that you are thoughtful about the work that can be assigned early on. But mostly, they really want to form connections. They want to know where to go. And that means even in the company virtually. And they really want to feel a sense of belonging. So if you want them to be productive, focus on that just as much as learning their job. It's critical. So, action planning. What specific actions will you take kind of based on what we talked about today? Is there a takeaway? One or two things I'd love to hear. I'd love for you to write them down, put them in the chat. And I would also love any ideas. There's countless things that companies are doing that, are really terrific ideas. So this is all an open forum for all of us to learn from each other. So if you have a great idea, I invite you to put it in the chat. And if anyone has any questions, we're going to open up the floor for questions at this time. Feel free to put them in the chat. Misty will be happy to share them for the group. And I really want to thank you all for your great attention today. And I hope that this will make for some successful employee onboarding.
Thank you, Peggy. Yes, please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, or if you would like to come off mute and ask any questions about the information that Peggy shared, we will allow some time for that.
Hi, Peggy. I have a question, if that's okay.
Yes.
I left a message there on LinkedIn for you, so thank you very much. I would love a copy of these slides and the recording if I can. And I'm just eagerly looking up this owl in the room because I think a lot of us, there's probably about 45 people on this call, think the same. But can you tell us more about this owl and how that can kind of strike a balance between those people joining a meeting at a distance and then, of course, those speaking in a room during those little chit chats?
You know what? I never feel like there are too many ideas. So literally yesterday, I was talking to my friend and she mentioned it to me. So I don't have anything more than what I shared about it, but I am very happy to find out. She just said that it turns to the speaker. So that the people, in there who are remotely located can definitely see that speaker easily. I'm not sure if there's a microphone on it as well. We didn't talk about that, but she said that it works great. So I'm happy to find out who makes the owl and how to get it, and we can get that back out to the group.
Yes, Peggy, I just put a link in the chat to an owl off of Amazon. It is called owl. It's like a Zoom owl, so you can use it, and it's amazing. So I have used this throughout COVID as I was teaching on, in the classroom, but I also had students that were online. So if a student in the classroom would talk, then the owl would turn and rotate to that individual, and that would pick up the sound, and then it would also share. It is also a speaker, so the person or who's speaking on the Zoom platform can hear, and we can see them on the screen as well. So it is very intuitive. It is an amazing tool to have when we do virtual, and some of us are hybrid.
Thanks, Misty. I think we need to get one.
It's a great tool. So a couple of questions about the recording and the slides. We will send these out after our session today. Any other questions for Peggy about her virtual onboarding best practices and strategies?
And I would love it too, if people have any other fun ideas. I'd love to see those in the chat for everyone's benefit. Big one to me that's free, that maybe I don't remember if I mentioned or not actually, but some in that interim between the offer and the start date, you could even send out like a fruit bouquet. Again, depends on your company, your budget, how much hiring you're doing. That's a great way to let the family know that you're excited about this person coming on board. And but nothing is better sometimes than a phone call or an email from your manager just saying super excited to have you on board. That's probably the best thing, I think.
Well, thank you all for joining. Let's, if you still have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, as you can still do that. But please make sure that you are following us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We share quite a bit of information, and that is just one of the best ways to stay connected with Purple Ink. You also can visit our website, as we have tons of information there. But you all get a sneak peek of our upcoming 2023 webinars. So take a screenshot or get your phone out and snap a picture of this slide, because this has some dates of our upcoming topics for 2023. I only put the first 6 months. We have our year planned out, but I just wanted to give you our first 6 months so you can start having some good information to look forward to. So we also have a brand new cohort starting in January for Power Up Your Strengths. This is an amazing opportunity to get Clifton Strengths certified. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and you can go right to our website and you can find out more about getting certified. So if you're a coach or a trainer, or if you use strengths in your workplace, this is a great opportunity to get strengths certified and to use this amazing tool. So go ahead, please feel free to click on that link and check out our cohort and all of the amazing things that you'll get for this training session that is coming up.
And if anybody needs me to put that back up later, I'll put it back up, but we'll just get through these first. So
this training has been SHRM certified. So this is another number that you want to take down and retain your activity code for future reference. I also put it in the chat, so you can go ahead and copy that out and save that, so you can get your 1 SHRM PDC credits. Also, we would love for you to take this survey. You can just take your phone out and scan it with a QR. You can just scan the QR code. But we just like to get some information about the webinar, and also so we can get some information about some upcoming topics that all of you would like to hear more about. So, feedback is very, very important to us. So just take some time. There's only a few questions in there. We would greatly appreciate it. And again, I put the link in the chat as well, or you can scan the QR code for us. Any other questions before we close out our time together today? Please feel free to reach out to us if you are in need of any services or have any questions. Peggy's information is on there. But we thank you all for joining us today for our webinar.
Thanks so much, everyone, for attending.